Welcome, everybody, to a EU Masters episode of Esports with Emmerich, presented to you by not only drroto.com, but also the esports department. I'll be in the Discord as I normally are for both sites if you have any questions, but we really want to just kind of go through some of the things that we can expect, some backgrounds on these teams. I know if you're like me, that you're just completely sick of these 2-game slates. And so seeing a 6-game slate on the schedule for tomorrow is utterly refreshing. But we're not going to dive into the DFS portion of it here. What we're going to really kind of talk about is just these groups, the expectations I have, a little bit of background on each one of these teams. So I'm going to take the camera off myself. I'm not looking so hot today. Had a kind of a late night. So let's dive in. These sheets will be available to anybody. You can shoot me with a DM. I can send these over to you, or I will post them in the esports department Discord for anybody that is interested in having these. So let's take a look here. So in Group A, we have Rogue, Anthosis Fermagusta, Misfits, Premier, and UCAM. This is a group of some familiar names. I believe, actually, every one of these teams was in EU Masters Spring. We are looking at a pretty clear-cut pair of teams that I think are going to get out of this. I think it's going to be Misfits. I think it's going to be Rogue. I think both of these teams are cut above the other two. It will be really interesting to see Anthosis Fermagusta and how this 28 kills per win and 20 deaths per loss kind of translates over into more of a major region. And it's also going to be interesting because they're one of several teams that ended their regular split on 11.13. So they have not played on patch 11.14 or 11.15 nearly as much as some of these other teams and in a competitive environment. Certainly the playoffs are a little bit different, but this is obviously a best of one, and the teams that are a little bit more familiar with these things probably stand to reason to have a little bit of an advantage. I think Rogue at 12-2 during the regular split kind of had a little bit of a hiccup in the playoffs and was knocked out and had to go through the play-in stages. They ended up actually making it out of the group of death. It was Group D, just utterly stacked top to bottom, and Rogue had a fantastic day one in the play-ins where they went 3-0, were able to just defeat everybody, kind of stumbled a little bit on day two, but was enough to get out of that kind of group stage and into the knockouts where they prevailed. They do have a pretty dominant set of stats when it comes to like their cold difference at 15 minutes, their early game rating. Both of these are just sky high at 3,369, and then an early game rating of 77, which is almost highest in the entire group stage. I think it's only Mako that's a little bit higher at 77.8. So I like Rogue. I think they're definitely beatable, and they are a team that you can target. But when they lose, they don't really give a ton of deaths up. So that's just kind of a point. They have been playing all together the entire year. This is the same roster that we saw in spring. This is the same roster in summer. This is the same group of guys, and that kind of counts for something to me. When it comes to Anthosis Fermagusta, they made some changes from their spring team. Jax Blank replaces Wooloo in the top lane. He came from the GLL's second best team at the time. Wooloo was interesting because he was considered one of the best Fior top laners in Greece, and we got to see that last spring. And he did have a couple other pocket picks that we just we're not going to see. Jack Blank has came in and looked good. And then also, AF went ahead and changed out their bottom lane. We have Golden Toast replacing Locky, and then iLevy replacing Cubby. I don't know how to say it. Look, both of these guys used to play on the same team together, so there's familiarity with each other. This is a team that, I think can make some waves. They had, certainly from a fantasy perspective, they project out better than pretty much every one of these other teams in terms of whether they win or whether they lose. You're going to want a piece of their game. And so that's just something to keep in mind. I don't realistically think that they have a chance to get out of this group. It's very difficult for me to see them besting either Rogue or Misfits, let alone UCAM when we throw that in there. When it comes to Misfits, this is a team that has a massive experience edge. They're playing, most of these guys have tons of LEC experience. Most of these guys have EU Masters experience, and that counts for something, because when we talk about, like Anthosis, Framagusta, these guys don't. So Misfits came out. They had a decent regular season, 11-7. They kind of lost to the teams that you'd expect them to lose, but they made a really nice run in the playoffs and were able to knock off Carmine Corp. And along with Carmine Corp, both of these teams are, I think, the odds-on favorites to win this whole thing. So I'm thinking Misfits get out. I think Rogue gets out. And then when you talk about UCAM is a team that really looks very similar to what we saw in spring when they made a deep run, but they did replace Plasma by Wannabe, who then was replaced by Hantera, who previously played for Vitality B in the LFL. They were much better in the season with Plasma, but they found their form. Well, I guess I should say that they were better in the spring than they were in the summer, and part of this is probably the roster changes going into effect, and you see, the synergy between the team kind of come together, especially in the playoffs, where they made a significant run after going 10-8, beating Mad Lions, G2 Arctic, and then lost to the Vodafone Giants in the finals. So very surprised that this team made it here, and you can kind of see some of the statistical numbers for this team are significantly worse than others. I mean, you look at your goal difference at 15, it's only 147. I think that's one of the worst in the entire tournament. Their early game and mid to late game rating are both pretty poor, have a problem getting the first blood, one of the lowest in the tournament. So this is a team that, when we're talking about from a DFS standpoint, I'm going to target against UCAM. I think people are going to probably flock to them. They're going to command higher ownership than they need to, but they are not a team that I have been impressed by watching them throughout the split. And the 19.3 deaths per loss is something that I'm definitely going to want to target. I would be surprised if UCAM made it out. I think this is a clear, Rogue, Misfits, 1-2, whichever way that, that matchup goes. Wouldn't be surprised as Anthosis and UCAM, pulled off an upset here and there, but I think it's pretty clear cut between those two teams. So let's move on to Group B. Now, we are not going to see Group B on day one. This is another kind of, this is probably to me one of the weakest groups that we have. We have the Movie Star Riders, who after just a completely dominant regular split kind of fell flat in the in the playoffs. They lost to Vodafone. That was a big surprise. They were 14-4 with 24 kills per win and just some dominant stats in a major region. These are some of the stats that you expect to see from teams like AF, you see from Zero Tenacity and some of these other kind of minor region teams that just beat up on all the bad teams in their divisions. But Movistar here, it just feels like they are going to be the odds-on favorite. To me, if I wasn't betting on one of the LFL teams, I'm betting on Movie Star Riders to win this entire thing. They're going to get out of this group. They have kind of some weak competition. You've got PDW from the Ultra League. This was a team that essentially was Illuminar Gaming in spring, who had some problems in spring and didn't make it out of groups. But they retooled the roster. Well, I guess they didn't retool the roster. The roster went elsewhere, and now that you see PDW. This team actually reminds me a lot of Schalke from spring, where this is a team that absolutely could beat anybody in this tournament, but more often than not, it's going to fall flat. They're going to have an upset here and there if they are a underdog in any of the matchups, but this is not a team that, I'm super excited about, but given the competition that they have within this group, I'm not sure that I wouldn't pick them to get out of it. Because next, you got Penta 1860. This is a team that just kind of, really had a great regular season. They won a lot of games, and I think they won a lot of games that they weren't supposed to. This was a team that, surprised me, surprised probably a lot of people, and got just placed right into the finals in the Prime League because of their regular split standings, and then just got absolutely demolished by Big in that final. 3-0 as a matter of fact, and they lost the season series to Big. So, when we're looking at the higher level of competition that we're going to see, presumably within this tournament, I think Penta 1860 is going to have a hard time. You can see their goal difference at 15 is second worst in the entire tournament. Their early game rating is terrible. They do excel in the mid to late game, and that's something that you'd expect. If their goal difference is 2 at 15 and they're a 13 out of 18 win team, they're probably not a very good early game team. And if they're going to have those wins, one can extrapolate that the mid to late game is going to be the strength for this team. But I do worry, the first blood rate being 44%, the first turret being 28%, they're just going to struggle within this tournament. But again, this group is by far the weakest. And so would not be surprised if one of the two of those teams, PDW or Penta 1860, joined Movie Star Riders and found their way out of this group. Rounding it out, we have Tricked Esports. Really, Tricked Esports is, look, I'm not taking this team very serious. Obviously, this was a team that won me and a lot of people a good amount of money during the regular split, as it was one of my lock bets. And they shouldn't have won that game. Late game, Ezreal comes through and saves the day. But Tricked Esports is only here because XL made the changes to their LEC roster and brought up the guys there. Then that roster kind of failed, and it opened the door for Tricked to be this number 2 seed. Now, look, they did earn their way here from that point. They did beat Fnatic. This is a team that is, decently skilled, and especially within this group, has an outside shot of making it out. This is a team that will peak at the group stage. If they get to the knockout, there's no way they're getting past that. I don't take the NLC very seriously, and, just the level of talent, the level of these teams, they're just not as good, especially when you look at, the best team being a kind of a neutered version of, the spring runner-ups, and that's XL. Two of those guys went into the LEC, rightfully so, and that team just wasn't the same. Now we're going to go over to Group C, which, again, all of these groups are pretty equally balanced. This isn't like what we saw in play-ins where there was a specific group that was significantly stronger than the rest of them. Here we have, the Prime League champions, Big, a team that I was huge on back in the spring. They kind of fell flat, made a couple changes to this team. I don't think that they're as strong as that spring version. They did disappoint and have, some stumbles during the regular season. As you can see, that they were 12-7 during the summer split, but they did cruise through the playoffs, as I stated earlier, 3-0ing the Penta 1860 team en route to winning, the Prime League Summer. They're going up against a Fnatic Rising team from NLC, who is, again, a team that has a lot of potential, but they did struggle down the stretch as Fabian decided to retire in the mid-split. Now, they were the clear second best team in the NLC prior to that, behind XL. But, in the playoffs, they did lose to Tricked, and really kind of, worries me about this team in terms of deep run potential. They struggle against Movie Star in the play-ins, where they went 1-2 against them. They did manage to take a game off of them, so that in and of itself is reassuring that this team has a chance of getting out of this group. Now, if they don't, I definitely think it's going to be probably from Illuminar Gaming. This is kind of an unknown. They failed to get out of groups in spring, and then Illuminar didn't renew their roster contracts for anybody. They brought in a completely new roster of lower division players to fill out this team. Their regular split really didn't wow me, but they did have a pretty nice run in the playoffs. They beat SK Gaming 3-1, and then they 3-0'd Rogue before falling to PDW in the finals. So the question is, these guys are really green. They don't have a ton of experience. Are the lights going to be too bright for this team? Is this stage going to be too big? Is this going to be a situation where they fail to perform much like the earlier version of Illuminar Gaming did in spring? I don't know. But then we have Zero Tenacity. Quite honestly, the EBL representative here, they're going to be over their head. They come from a weaker region in the Serbian league where two of the regular split teams, or teams in the regular split, went 1-13. They only had 2 rounds in their playoffs. The vast majority of this team is inexperienced and played for minor league teams in the minor leagues of the minor leagues. So, when we're talking about these ERLs, they're obviously the minor leagues. They're not a major league. They're the minor leagues to the LEC. And to that extent, some of these teams are the minor leagues to the major region ERLs. So your LFLs, your Super League, your Prime League, your Ultra League, which just produces a ton of the players for the LFL and these other places. So Zero Tenacity probably has an opportunity to take 1 or 2 games in the group stage, but this is not a team that I'm looking to get past there. I'm not betting on their futures. I'm probably going to back Big and Fnatic as kind of the chalky 2 to get out of this. And that's going to bring us to the final one. That's going to be Group D, Carmine Corp, which is the bookmaker favorites to go ahead and repeat here spring to summer. It makes sense. They did appear to have, lose a little bit of a step in summer over spring. When you end up having to replace a player that goes on to become like the rookie of the year in the LEC, that kind of makes sense. Gavishard is a decent replacement, but look, let's be honest with ourselves. He's no Adam. So you don't have that ultra aggressive top laner kind of in a carry position to go along with your more traditional jungle mid and ADC carries. I still think that Carmine is kind of the class of this group, and I don't see any reason why they would have any issue getting out of this. They did kind of have a little bit of a scare recently where they're playing the LFL, not the year-long finals, not the summer finals. They're playing the year-long finals. They were down 2-1 to Vitality. They ended up coming back and winning that 3-2. So kind of reinforces that they're more than capable under the newest patch to continue with the dominance, get out of this group. Now, Mako is making their return to the EU Masters. This time they're coming with a different bot lane. Now, Mako doesn't look like they're going to make it out of this group. A loss from one of the major region teams is, it's going to spell doom for this team. They're not a particularly bloody team when they win. They do give up a lot of kills when they lose. It's just not a team that I see getting past Carmine or getting out of this group because of the next 2 teams we're going to discuss. You've got Mouse Sports here. No leader, no problem. Chetlo just steps in here, comes into the mid lane and gives this team a control mage presence that I think is going to benefit them in this tournament. We saw that be kind of a problem in past EU Masters. As leader, it isn't strong with those type of champions. He's certainly a guy that plays his assassin type champions and plays it well even at this level. But we saw, I want to say it was against Luminar Gaming in the very first game of groups in spring. He busted out a victor and he just kind of looked a little bit lost. I mean, he wanted to play what the team needed him to play, but it just wasn't his comfort zone. And I think that, the change to the roster here kind of opens up a lot of different things, because with leader doing that, a lot of times Gadget would have to play like an AP bottom lane or just different champions to kind of surround that AD mid lane that you don't have to worry about as much anymore. Certainly with the rise of several other AP jungles, that's not as big of an issue, but I still think that this is just a more well-rounded team than we've seen previously from Mouse Sports, and I definitely think this is a team that's going to get out of this group. Finally, rounding it out, we've got the Vodafone Giants, somebody from, this has got a couple guys here from, 2020 that all the names we're going to kind of, we're going to recognize. A couple of key things about this team. They have the longest game average of any team in this tournament at 35 minutes. They failed to qualify in summer, losing in a 3-4 match to UCAM. They did make a couple changes going into summer. They brought Mini Duke over from Cream to man the mid lane, and things kind of just were really rocky at the beginning. You can look at this team went 8-10 during the summer split, just kind of snuck into the playoffs, but really the team kind of clicked at that point. They were able to make a nice run, 3-0ing Mad Lions, 3-1ing Movie Star, and then finally defeating UCAM in the finals 3-1 to kind of earn their place here. I do feel like they're going to be a team that's not on the same talent level as some of these other kind of premier teams, but they do have a ton of experience. They're playing at their peak, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to get out of this group. I'm not going to kind of go out on a limb here and say that they will. I definitely think that this one is Carmine Corp, and this is going to be Mouse Sports. I think Group C is definitely going to be big. It's going to be Fnatic. Group B is Movie Star Riders, and one of the other three, I'm going to go ahead and say it's going to be Penta 1860 because, well, why not? And then Group A is Rogue and Misfits. So, that's kind of just the overview here. So just to give you an idea of what I have put together here is we have all the players, so you can go ahead and take a look at their statistics. This is wins and losses, kind of champion pools played. The one thing that I would mark is that there is a star here for Du Jour because, again, while this is regular split information, Du Jour kind of joined at the end of the regular split, so his information is going to be a little bit different. So I did go ahead and pull play-ins, and I pulled playoffs to extrapolate his numbers. But then we also have each one of these guys broken down by group, and there'll be a little bit more coverage a little bit later as I go over kind of the DFS slate. But this was the preseason preview. If you're interested in finding out some more about this, you can find this content in one of two places. You can find it over at the esportsdepartment.com. Completely free. All this information, Discord is free. This information is going to be over there. But also you can find all my content too, specifically is going to be at drroto.com. We have a lot of premium stuff for the other sports as well, whether it be football, baseball, and all your other non-esports related needs. So check both of those sites out and drop a sub, drop some donations. Let's win some money, and join me later as we talk about the DFS slate. So this has been another episode of Esports with Emmer. You have a good one.